Hello, welcome back to Like Maria. Today I'm going to do a contextual video about the history of Ireland, and this video is going to be useful if you're studying any literature associated with Ireland. So Waiting for Godot, Joyce's Dubliners, Ulysses, any of Yeats's poetry, Brian Friel's translations, and so on and so forth. It's really useful as well given what's happening at the moment politically. So let's get started. Originally, Ireland was broken up into 4 provinces. They were Ulster, Leinster, Munster and Connaught. So they were really kingdoms, and I'm going way back into the Middle Ages and before this, and they were very rural and in part very underdeveloped. Particularly Ulster was a very Gaelic region, and there were often tribesmen and farmers wandering from patches to patches and not really having a stable, settled development of life. So really a very rural situation, and one might say quite primitive in many respects. So 4 provinces. Under James I in 1606, we have what we call the Plantation of Ulster. James decides that these Irish people are a little bit wild, there's some good land over there, and he's going to send people mainly from Northern England and Scotland over to settle in Ulster. These people are mainly Protestant, and that is really important. They move over to Ulster, which is in the north part of Ireland, and they settle and gradually become established and create wealth and industry. So in some ways it's quite a good thing because they kind of generate wealth and industry for that region. But in many ways it's problematic because there's a big culture clash between the newcomers and the old people who now do not have any land anymore, do not have any rights, and do not have their old traditional way of life. So from 1600 onwards, there is this clash between Protestants and Catholics, more developed and a more rural setting. And it all comes to fruition in the 1801 Act of Union. So this 200 plus years ago, this act joined the Kingdom of Ireland with the United Kingdom. So it will all together. And you can see this quite visually if you look at the history of the Union flag, where we have the St. Patrick's cross, the red cross going across like this, which is added to the flag at this time. So really quite a significant change. This meant that the whole of the island of Ireland was ruled from Westminster, ruled from London, and they didn't have any sort of devolution whatsoever. Now, the Irish, understandably, weren't too keen on this, and they spent most of the 19th century fighting for what they termed home rule. By the end of the 19th century, there were significant movements towards home rule. Big characters in this are people like Charles Stewart Parnell and the Prime Minister Gladstone in that historical period. So there was some progress and some movement towards home rule, and certainly at the beginning of the 20th century this was looking increasingly likely. However, what happened at the beginning of the 20th century? Bam! World War I. So what we have is a situation where the Irish are moving towards home rule, but World War I gets in the way. This is very problematic because some Irish people feel they need to fight against Germany. Others feel, no, it's far better to fight against the British. This is a chance where the British are weak. So there becomes huge problematic divided loyalties. In the midst of all this, a bunch of rebels get together in Dublin and create what we now call the Easter Rising. Very famous Yeats poem about this. And it's at Easter 1916, it falls flat on its face. Now, this is problematic because the British government have to deal with this rebellion. So they shoot the rebels. They kill some of the rebels, and this has a dual effect. Some people therefore support the British and say the rebels had no business interfering at a point when England was fighting a different aggressor. But many of the people who were associated with the rebels and the wider community felt that they had been dealt with brutally. And this kind of stirred up a feeling of, we want home rule, we want it now, we don't care. So we have a very unstable time. In 1919, we get one of the political parties, the Republican Party, Sinn Féin, declaring independence. So there was an actual declaration of independence. And throughout this time, we have the War of Independence, culminating in 1921 with the Anglo-Irish Treaty and the creation in 1922 of the Irish Free State. Now, this is where it all starts getting very difficult. The Irish Free State was the idea that most of Ireland could be ruled by Dublin. The Irish had autonomy, but a little bit of it was still going to be ruled by Westminster, and they were the counties in the north. Interestingly, it's not the entire province of Ulster, but only 6 counties. And these 6 counties are Antrim, Armagh, County Down, Fermanagh, Londonderry, Monaghan. 6 counties in the north. The other 26 counties remain and are called the Republic of Ireland. So we have a border, and this is the border that causes so much problem and is causing problems still today. Now, things ticks along kind of okay for a few years, but by the 1960s, problems about this border were beginning to escalate. Both sides protested and rioted, and there was quite a deal of terrorist activity. And it was really stirred up in the 1960s because certain Catholic and Republican people in the north of Ireland felt that they weren't having equal rights. They were not experiencing equal rights with the Protestants. And there were problems of unemployment and socio-economic problems that made this all come to a head in the 60s. So what we have is a period that we call colloquially the Troubles in Northern Ireland. And this has grumbled on and on right until today, where one could argue we're still having intellectual troubles, if not actually so much of the physical troubles. The Troubles were really quite brutal. A lot of people died on both sides as a result of brutal terrorist actions. And it all came to a head really towards the late 80s and 90s, where there was a bombing campaign by the IRA. It started to interfere with people living in England. And this really brought it to the forefront of the political agenda. So what happened at the end of the 1990s? We have real impetus to solve the problem of the Troubles and to sort out this border problem that goes right back to the 1920s, when we had 6 counties versus the 26 counties. And we have what we call the Good Friday Agreement, that Tony Blair, and in particular a British politician, Mo Molan, who sadly now died, worked long and hard to come to an agreement with all the parties in Northern Ireland. And what they set up in the Good Friday Agreement was a devolved government. So rather like we now have in Scotland and Wales, the north of Ireland was able to govern themselves. There was a power sharing agreement between the parties. This resolved a lot of the problems, and it did stop a lot of the violence. So a lot of arms were handed in and the atmosphere became much calmer. There were still rivalries, but it became much calmer. Until, of course, 2016, when Brexit reared its ugly head. The problem for Brexit was that the north of Ireland is, of course, separated by a sea from the rest of the United Kingdom, but it's also separated from the Republic of Ireland, which remained in the European Union, by a land border. And this is a very extraordinary thing, because what was happening is goods were going from the mainland, the UK, to Northern Ireland and down to the Republic of Ireland, without any checks previously because we were all one big happy family in the EU. But as soon as the UK withdrew from the EU during Brexit, then of course it becomes problematic because we have some people were demanding a hard border with the Republic of Ireland to prevent trade illegally. So we moved on to Boris sorting out Brexit. He came up with the 2019 Northern Ireland Protocol. However, many of the parties in Northern Ireland were not happy with this. So what we've got now is Rishi Sunak having to go back and work through the protocol and change it to accommodate different ideas. And what he's come up with is the Windsor Framework, which deals with goods going from the UK mainland over to Northern Ireland and allows a certain amount of flexibility for them then to go on to the EU in the Republic of Ireland. I'm just going to include one more slide on terminology that I think is going to be really helpful to you. Okay, so after the plantation of Ulster and after the 1801 Act of Union, what we have developing is two camps. On the one hand, we have people that support the Union. They are called the Unionists. They are loyalists, they are Protestants, and they want to be united in a union with Westminster, London and the UK. They are also called Orange men. This term comes from William of Orange, who was involved in some campaigns. And they are very adamant that they want to stay with London and the UK, and they do not want to be part of a united Ireland. On the other hand, we have Republicans. Their colour is green, to sort of counter the orange. It's always been green. And they are supporting the Free State, and they want a completely united Ireland. They want the 26 counties to be married up with the 6 counties in Northern Ireland, so that they can all go back to the time before the plantation of Ulster, before the Act of Union. They can all go back to the time when they had 4 provinces. And they are called Republicans. So the Republicans are Catholic. They are supporting a united Ireland, a whole of Ireland being all one together. They want to get rid of any border. And they really want to stay in the EU as well. That's the important thing about that. So there we have it, a brief overview of the way Irish politics and the country of Ireland has evolved since we had the 4 provinces. Thank you for listening today. Don't forget to ping that like button and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.